Welcome to another episode of the Mixtape Matinee Podcast. I'm your host, Cole, and I'm honored today to have on Jeff Rosenberg, a musician who's been in bands such as Lavender Diamond, Young People, Pink and Brown. He also has his own solo work under Mr Rosenberg. And I'll link all this stuff in the show notes under Bandcamp. And then you also just started this new band called RC Flying Band with some of your friends. Is that right?
Yeah, Flying Field. I
Flying
don't know
Fields.
if that name is going to stick,
Oh,
but
okay.
we're working on pulling our first shows together
Cool.
for this year.
Awesome. Well, can you kind of tell us what's kind of that band like?
I think since we're talking about Krang, it's probably the closest thing that I've done to that sort of sound in a while. It's people, a lot of folks that I've played with before, but never in this configuration. So I'm playing guitars mostly and singing or yelping or whatever I do.
Yeah.
And my old friend Jeff Kwong, who also played in Lavender Diamond for a while, and played with me and Steve from Lavender Diamond and Ron from Lavender Diamond and another band that we had briefly called Daylong Valleys of the Nile. He's playing bass. Randy Randall, who's an old pal, who's in the band No Age, is playing another guitar, or guitars and sounds and whatever he does. And Ben Adrian, who used to be in a band that I knew in SF way back in the day called Replicator, is playing drums. So it's a good group of old rocker guys.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's cool. So if any of our listeners in the LA area, go follow Jeff and go see him when they're playing next.
Yeah, I'll update you on whatever we choose for the name of the band, but for now it's Flying Field.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, like I was saying before we started, I just really appreciate you being on, Jeff. Just a really big fan of what you've done and of this Krang album, which is kind of mostly what we're going to be talking about today. Can I guess to start off, I think I messed up on our original episode with my friends. I think I assumed that Brian Gibson was on bass, but I think he was actually on drums.
Yeah, no, that's right. He was playing drums. And at that time, he had a couple other bands going on. Lightning Bolt obviously was happening, and we, I don't know, there's a really interesting creative environment around that time in Providence. So like a bunch of our bands were inspired by and kind of sort of egging each other on creatively together. Like Lightning Bolt was pushing way beyond, I think, creative boundaries and noise boundaries and sort of like, I don't know, like I just remember this feeling of all of us wanting to make music that would get everyone psyched up and like, and kind of push ourselves to play faster, play harder, like write things that were weirder, do things that would kind of help everyone to get out of themselves a little bit and just either dance or like, you know, just have a good time, think differently. There were a few different sort of like transformative events that happened during that time. I mean, Fort Thunder kept kind of like pushing things in the direction of like, wow, I never knew a party could be this crazy, or like, why is everyone suddenly like, you know, wearing costumes, or like, why are like, I didn't know that you could have noise bands at a wrestling night and have it be this fun and wild. Or like, I think you guys referenced the everyone suddenly like grabbed like formed a marching band basically and like marched like you just grab a bass drum and strap it on, or like, find a horn, and like everyone would suddenly form into like a marching band roving party and go through the tunnel in Providence, um, and then later get arrested. But
That sounds like a
that
fun
was sort
time
of,
though.
yeah, it was a really cool time. Totally unexpected, but I'm still pals with a lot of those folks, and yeah. So Brian Gibson he took over playing drums for Josh Webb,
Okay.
Josiah Webb, who I can't remember why he left the band. I think he had a couple of other bands that he was um, working more on playing guitar and singing for.
Mm-hmm.
So like it was less of his interest to keep playing drums. But Josh is an amazing drummer. Like he was in this band called Difference Engine. I don't know if you ever heard them, but
Nah, I
they were
haven't.
like the shoegaze band that didn't make it or I mean, they kind of made it, but not like My Bloody Valentine or some of
Right.
their
Yeah.
contemporaries. But they put out a couple of really good records and were super interesting. So I don't know. Josh was our first drummer, and then the second configuration had Brian on drums, and he was just kind of trying to play like fast and hard and crazy as much as he could.
I was just curious how you guys all, I mean, just initially how you guys formed the band and then also who decided on the name because I know it's based off of that sci-fi book.
Yeah, it felt a little arbitrary at the time. I think we were I don't remember all the names that were in play, and this was before the days of sort of internet like band name generator options that
Yeah.
are and kind of merge several weird words together into like something that may or may not be taken already in the world of band names.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always fun to come up with band names, but I think we were kind of like Alan Dean Foster, the guy who wrote those books, was also involved in writing the books that inspired Star Wars. Um, so I think we had sort of a nerd fandom thing going on with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I seem to recall that Tar-Aiym Krang book being around one night when everyone was probably smoking a lot of weed and like and playing guitars, and we kind of nerded out on certain passages, um, but yeah, it wasn't like a sci-fi band per se or
Yeah, yeah.
like anything about his writing, but I think there was some connection that was made during that time between some of the ideas. I think there's also like there's a fictional item that's in that book that was like an all powerful sort of object. I think the Krang was that object.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were, kind of noodling around on the idea of like, well, what if we could possess that object? And like,
Yeah.
you know, that enabled us to write these like weirdly powerful songs or something like
Yeah.
that. So I don't like you make interesting choices.
No, yeah, I think that's a cool story. When you guys got together initially to start writing songs, how were the songs written? Did you guys just get together and just start jamming things out and then just slowly work on them, or how did that all happen?
um, we had John and I played guitars a lot together. I remember um, we would write a lot in my apartment or his apartment, and we didn't really have a practice space for a while. Although when we started needing to play loud, uh, we we got this practice space down at uh, the this warehouse. Like Providence, kind of full of like old jewelry jewelry warehouses and like fruit packing warehouses and like all of these sort of um, like old semi-industrial spaces that
Mm-hmm.
um, generally are the types of places you would want to go, put a bunch of amps in and see if you could play loud and not disturb people. Although it's, for the most part, none of them are really soundproof. So you're like, as we found when we all moved to Olneyville, it more depends on how far away your neighbors are, like who you piss off.
Yeah.
But we moved into this place that I think was out in Pawtucket. I want to say it's like a fruit warehouse run by a family named Vinji. I remember it just smelled like onions all the time. It was pretty gross, but it was something like $50 a month, so you kind of can't go wrong. But that was where like started playing more in earnest with Josh Webb and like formed sort of the genesis of this band. Also, I was working at the time in the Brown electronic music studio, and I like um, had access to all this gear. So we would go and rehearse in the music studio and record in there. And I think the first recordings that we did, if I recall correctly, were on the ADAT machine that they had.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've heard of that.
So we made there's like, I don't know if you like how much you explored all of the different recordings that I'd put up on that Bandcamp, but the first record or EP,
Yeah.
I think was recorded on that ADAT machine in the Brown Electronic Music Studio. Um, and that was pretty fun. I think having access to all that gear and like being able to sort of mess around with like giant Neve mixing boards and like really good mics and that sort of thing allowed us to start thinking about how did we want to make actually tweak sounds and kind of make things that were still DIY sounding but kind of had different textures to them, and like how do you get a good drum recording and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was I think it was a number of different spaces that we would play in. I'm trying to recall what else. There was a while I was living at this co-op, and I think we rehearsed there for a while. Brown had a few different spaces where I was putting on shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, sometimes we would either play there or rehearse there. Just, it was basically like wherever you could play loud.
That's where you wanted to be. Yeah.
And not get shut down.
Yeah.
Or like it would at least give you a couple hours before you got shut down.
Yeah. So it was mostly just getting together and then just jamming out the songs, figuring it out, or is it mostly
Yeah,
you
I
and
mean,
John?
we didn't really have a process, I
Oh,
guess.
okay.
I mean, the song ideas were, I think, mostly like John and I kind of noodling around with. We're really into stuff like Polvo at the time, and
Oh,
like
yeah.
there was some Captain Beefheart influence, and like I don't know, like I was listening to some stuff that was a little bit more on the hardcore end of things, like Unwound, and still kind of coming out of this like post Discord phase of like Fugazi and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the shows for bands that I was putting on that were coming through town were kind of in that vein too, but like but there was stuff like Scratch Acid that we're all getting
Oh,
excited
yeah.
about.
Scratch
Like
Acid's awesome.
and
Yeah.
like like other sort of heavy music that was pushing boundaries that like US Maple. I
Oh,
remember there
yeah.
was this really transformative show that they played at Fort Thunder where all of us like were just standing right in front of them and like jaws on the floor, like watching this band play music off of their first record, which none of us had heard. But we're like, it was like from another planet, and so loose, and yet it all held together. And it was super powerful, and they just like completely blew our minds. And so, like, those types of things were entered into our consciousness at the time, and we were like actively trying to subvert like writing a normal song by like, okay, well, what if everything just like falls apart during this section and then comes back together again on this riff. And like it would kind of be like, okay, here's the destination we want to get to, and here's where we are now, and like let's let everyone sort of do their thing in the interim part to get from point A to point B. And I think with enough practice that ended up sounding more cohesive. But like at first it was just more like, okay, like A is put together, B is put together, but in the middle is just a mess.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I can definitely hear the U.S. Maple influence. Those guys are crazy. So that's cool that you were very influenced by them. I had a question about the album covers. The album cover for the Krang album is just a poster for a Fort Thunder show. Who do you know who made that poster?
Yeah, that was a Matt Brinkman poster.
Okay,
And he, do you know who he is? He's
I
like,
don't.
he and Brian Chippendale, with a couple of other guys, but mainly the two of them were kind of the nexus of Fort Thunder. Like they built it together. And they both did a lot of screen printing and still do. But Matt's posters were all over Providence, like wheat pasted everywhere. I would go out with him and wheat paste things all around town, and like that was kind of our deal at the time. He and a guy named Ara Peterson had a band called Force Field, and Jim Drain that had a bunch of records out on Load, which were kind of contemporary of Lightning Bolt. And then Matt and Brian had a band called Mind Flare, that was pretty insane. And if you can get any of the recordings, I would just basically try to find stuff that's on the Load catalog from that era of like late 90s, early 2000s, and dive deep, because it's all great stuff. But yeah, Matt made that poster, and he was big, I think, in terms of like creating opportunities for and promoting bands around Providence. So like he was always a big supporter of ours, tried to help us get shows.
And then, so selecting it for the album cover,
That actually wasn't the album cover. Like I don't know if we ever did an album
I
cover
just
for
meant
that.
for Bandcamp, I guess. Did
Yeah.
you just pick that because that was one of your show posters? Is that why?
Yeah. I was looking for something that would sort of represent who we were and sort of what our spirit was. It's sort of a like there's sort of a sad story to tell with this band, that kind of culminated around when we did that second record, and it's probably also the reason why we didn't continue much beyond that record, which was, there was a party that we were playing at in the spring, I think of 97, I want to say, where it was called the Bunny Love Party. It was like a thing that they had every spring in RISD. It was like mainly a bunch of RISD kids who put it on. And this year we had a bunch of bands playing, and it was in this house, and it was we were playing, I think, on the third floor of the house. It was, super packed, fun party, all of our friends and, people we knew were there. And it was, already I think Les Savifav had played, and like Lightning Bolt had played, and like a bunch of bands from today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we were in the middle of playing, and like I just remember um, this friend of ours, Nick, comes up and is like, you have to stop, like in the middle of a song, and like I had no idea what was going on, and it turns out two friends of ours had fallen out of a window,
Oh,
and
dang.
and like we're on the third floor of a house, and they were like hugging each other, and fell backwards through the window, and um, one of them was injured very badly, like broke every bone in his body, but lived, and then the one who broke his fall, Timmery, did not, and and so it's like this horrifying sort of traumatic event that happened while we were playing, and I think all of us who are there still remember it to this day, and we still talk about it or kind of trauma bonded over it.
Mm-hmm.
um, and the memory of this woman who passed, I mean, we've all tried to memorialize her, and like contributed music and things to comps, and like have um, you know sort of I done whatever we could to sort of help preserve her memory, and like she was a really wonderful friend of all of ours, and
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing was super tragic, but also like the our friend Elliot, who fell with her, he he was really shaped by this whole ordeal, and like had to go through a lot of like mending, and has all this guilt over. I mean, wasn't his fault at all, but like has
Mm-hmm.
guilt, survivor guilt. And so like the whole thing was, I don't know if it stopped our band from being a band, but I think, um, I know certainly for me, it was hard to remove associations of that event uh, from playing.
Mm-hmm.
And, uh, certainly it is possible to get past those kind of things happening, but
Mm-hmm.
that was such an important and indelibly difficult moment to get through, I guess. That I think a lot of us now who remember that, like Damien from OK Go was there at the
Mm-hmm.
time, and he and I still talk about that night and that party, and like it's just one of those things that like all of us who were there, you kind of can't.
Forget it. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's kind of
it's
shaped you.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's also sort of like the type of thing that I think deserves some good art to um, help us work through it.
Mm-hmm.
I know Damien, and I think even like I don't know if Ted Leo was there, but I know he knew Timmery, and like uh, and has memorialized her in song. But like certainly Danny Leo was there because he was like at RISD at the time. Uh, but like a lot of these people have sort of like tried to use music to work through the complex emotions of having been in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so we, I just think it's hard for us to talk about that band and not talk about that night.
Yeah.
That makes
Definitely.
sense.
No, yeah, that does make sense. Dang, I'm sorry that you had to go through that experience. That doesn't sound fun.
No, it
Yeah.
wasn't fun.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we later went to Dan St. Jake's place, and like decided we were going to record all of those songs and preserve what we were doing as best as we could. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Dan kind of gave us a really great sort of creative space in which to kind of do that. And and what resulted was that record that you've been listening to. And I think I credit Dan a lot for that, because I don't think a lot of us knew necessarily what to do after that night.
Yeah.
And we're kind of just shocked and weird. And Dan was just sort of like, let's just hang out and, spend some time improvising. Like, parts of those songs were just completely improv. And then we would stitch them in or transition them with songs that were much more composed.
Gotcha.
But totally credit Dan and his sort of musical thinking and kind of therapist type of vibe.
Yeah.
Making it all okay.
So that was recorded at Dan's studio then?
Yeah. He had, we were all at that time living in Atwells Avenue, which was across the street from Fort Thunder.
Okay.
So Dan had his own, we all built our own rooms in this warehouse, which was an interesting experience. The Dan had built his studio on one side of the hall, and then John and I lived on another side of that same hall. And so we just kind of rolled our amps down.
Oh, down the hallway. That's cool.
Dan's place and recorded over there.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was great.
So how long would you say that it took for you guys to record the album?
I think it was probably a couple of weeks we were in there. Like the tracking in earnest was maybe more like 3 or 4 days, but there was a lot of like messing around with sounds and spending time doing more improv and trying to sort of fill what we've perceived as spaces that between the songs, or things that may have needed to kind of get fleshed out. I talked
to Dan a little bit. He remembers that I think that you guys recorded on 8-track is what he remembers.
Yeah. He had, I think it was like a 1/2-inch 8-track, something like that, or maybe a 1-inch. Yeah, it's hard to remember the gear that we had at the time, or that Dan had.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to hear his impressions of that recording session, like what he remembers of it, because I'm sure it's more than I remember.
He also didn't remember some of the stuff, so there was some gaps in his memory as well. Do you remember? Do you have like a favorite song that you remember recording for that album?
Yeah, I think there's like on the record, I think it's like a lead-in section before Delicate Skin of Babies.
Yeah, that really long section.
Yeah, it's a long sort of like a noise improv that kind of turns into a drone that eventually gets more of a beat behind it. And then, but I think at first, like, it was us sort of making clicky sounds, and like John was playing with a couple of synths that he had created, or sort of like he was doing sort of proto OCs things at the time, like making music on like filing cabinets with contact microphones attached. So like John had a lot of weird shit going on. But yeah, I think that had that had some synth thing that he had brought in, and then we were kind of mucking around with that, and then it turned into this improv jam type of thing that kind of resolves itself right at the end.
And then it kind of just goes into the actual portion of the song near the end.
Yeah, I mean the song itself was recorded separately, but it sort of fit together as we were mixing it down, and I think we sort of realized at the end of that, the sort of chaotic noisy cacophonous part at the end with all the drums and the guitars kind of like bursting and exploding. And but then it ends on the same chord that starts that song. So it
Yeah.
kind of like, seems like the perfect sort of bookend intro.
Yeah.
But it's so long. I just, that band actually had like a really good sort of improv. We're good at listening to each other, I think, in that way,
Yeah.
and kind of being patient and laying back, and like letting everyone in the band do their thing, which you don't always get, I think, in different musical acts. But good thing there was in that live recording, there's a section at the beginning of the song which was like completely just improv. But yeah, I remember us like actually being pretty good at that.
Yeah.
Like in retrospect, you sort of realize, oh yeah, everyone had actually like listened, um, as opposed to just being obsessed with what you're playing.
Yeah. I mean, that song on the album is super cool. I mean, we talked about it on the podcast, but my friend Isaac, that was his like favorite song. He loves that little section that you guys did there. Do you remember when you guys recorded? Were you guys kind of just in a circle, or do you remember how you guys were positioned? I'm just curious.
In Dan's place, I think we were sort of spread out. I remember I looked at Gibson a lot. Like he and I were kind of trying to lock in a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then John and I needed to see each other. We all need to have line of sight to each other, but I think
Mm-hmm.
we were sort of spread out, as I recall.
Gotcha.
It's hard since I can't fully remember the layout of Dan's place. It's also like you have to kind of position yourself so that you can hear, but that the microphones don't pick up the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And like we had tricky stuff going on with baffling and like trying to isolate whatever we could.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't. It was probably pretty spread out, but we had line of sight,
Cool.
is what I recall.
For the recordings of the album, were you guys just, it seems like you guys are just playing straight into the amps, and then I guess the second question of that is, are you just playing in standard tuning, or do you remember the type of tunings that you guys would use?
I think it was mostly standard tuning.
Okay.
Maybe Balthazar or one of the songs might have been drop D. But I'm John used different tunings, and I think some of his guitars were like two notes, and like four strings would be on one note, and maybe two of the other strings would be on the other note, like D and A. Um,
Oh,
but
okay, cool.
like I think at the time he was trying to get more of like a Sonic Youthy type of sound. That is also a lot of the stuff that we were listening to. Maybe like Evil era type Sonic Youth.
Okay, yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I think effects wise, I know for me, I don't think I had much. Like I had a probably a rat pedal, that I was, occasionally turning on, but for the most part, it was direct into an amp. Um, John, I remember, had a few different distortions and probably a chorus pedal, that he was using. I think he had a big muff or probably multiple big muffs. Like you always need to have something to boost the sound if you have a big, because it
Yeah.
cuts the volume generally. So I can't remember. He might have had like an MXR distortion that also was the thing that was boosting the sound, so that when he used the big muff, it didn't cut too much.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I don't know. He might remember it better. He
Okay.
generally does have clearer
Yeah.
memories than I do. For some reason, I don't know why.
He just has that
Yeah.
brain. As far as shows, I mean, were you guys just playing a handful of shows, or did you guys play a lot, or do you remember from that
Um,
time?
we had, yeah, we were trying to play a lot for a while. I don't remember there being that many sort of like there were the shows that were documented, like that Fort Thunder show that's in the poster, and like the PW show there where we have that recording of it.
That live one, yeah.
Um, and then there's the show I told you about with which the tragic one in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember us playing that many more. Feel like there might have been a Met Cafe show at one point. Had things gone differently, we probably would have gone on tour, and actually like tried to take the show on the road. But um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was tough with a bunch of us being in school and then a bunch of us having other bands and other jobs and things to do. So it kind of uh, I think that was sort of up in the air probably going into that spring. But then I think the tragic show sort of caused us to think differently about the band and what we wanted to do that summer. That
Mm-hmm.
summer probably would have been the ideal time to go if we had
Yeah.
chosen to do that. Instead, I think a bunch of us got in the car and went on a cross country road trip, which ended up
Yeah.
being the reason, like how John and I both found San Francisco as like the next place that we wanted to live. So, there were good results from all of that, but it was sort of
Yeah.
like we all had to get out of Providence and like work through it on the road.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So speaking on the yeah, that tragedy, are there any songs on the Krang album, like when you were recording them, that I don't know, that you have like an emotional connection to that, or as far as songs, if that makes sense, or are they all kind of separate, from that tragedy?
Um, it's a good question. Uh, I think I remember us playing Puedo Bailar song while it was happening, I think. I'm not exactly sure. I could be wrong about that. It's, that moment I remember glimpses of, but I don't really remember all of what was happening other than like the really horrific things, which are sort of, like certain people screaming and like Nick actually coming through the crowd and stopping us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was either we were playing that song or maybe Balthazar.
So the album as a whole, you guys were kind of thinking about that when you were recording it, or
No, definitely we were. I think, all of us were incredibly fucked up over that and
yeah,
wanted to do something and feeling sort of powerless. Also, it's hard to not feel somewhat responsible for it
yeah,
when you're in the position of like this was kind of a dangerous party and like your very loud band is causing people to get wild and move around in ways that this house can't probably contain them.
yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
so like some of that was also going on, like just had to sort of work through having some
Mm-hmm.
over.
Do you feel like recording the album helped you though?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so. I think for how we were thinking about the band and sort of that event and everything, it kind of provided some closure. Although, now that we're all older and have done a lot of different things in the world, I think it's sort of like, well, how could we better sort of bring forth what we were doing and sort of the richness of all the stories that were happening at that time, in a way that
Mm-hmm.
other people could experience it and kind of know I mean, it's very multi-layered, and like even in this interview, it's sort of hard to explain all the things that were going on at the time. Like very,
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's almost like you could have a documentary or something that would sort of show all of the weirdnesses of Providence and of that night, and sort of how we're all
Mm-hmm.
uh, we we're all kind of bonded by it, but it also sort of caused this band to end, or like have, kind of put a terminus on what we were doing. Um,
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, I think definitely the spirit of that, like working through it, is part of that album for sure. I don't know if you necessarily hear it in the music, but we're all
Yeah.
thinking about it.
Right. And it's kind of getting that backstory though. I mean, it gives a little different perspective on it now. I mean, I'm going to be thinking about that now next time I listen to it. Kind of that's kind of what was going on with with you guys during that recording.
Yeah, I mean,
So.
I don't know that anyone's really told the story of that event
Mm-hmm.
online. I mean, it's the internet, so like likely something out there,
Yeah.
but
Somewhere.
I may go and do a little bit of deep Googling and see what I can find. Um, but yeah, it's interesting, and like I haven't really delved back into the emotions of what was going on for me during that period, and I think,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who you talk to, it's probably going to be similar, but you'll get other types of reflections through their points of view.
Through the.
That'll be
Yeah.
really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. But I mean, I appreciate you asking about it, um, because it brings me back in a way that's complex and somewhat difficult, but also I think worth feeling.
Yeah. I mean, not to talk about it, but yeah, with my job, I mean, I have to talk with people about death all the time. So, and sometimes talking about it helps out a little bit. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
totally get that.
yeah.
So,
That's
but
also interesting too.
uh,
It's your perspective on this matters a lot, and
yeah.
I think the fact that you guys unearthed this recording and sort of um, connected it back to a lot of music that you love, and things that you care about.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really interesting too, and like in a lot of ways, sort of gives me hope, because uh, I often think about, well, what sort of connects different generations of musicians and like artists, and like how did they find sort of lost artifacts, and gain inspiration from them, and like
Yeah.
connect dots, and like I it was interesting to see, like, and hear some of the, like, I didn't know all the band references that you guys were pulling um from your scene, and like the types of things that you listen to, that are current. Although I'll certainly go and check out if you have recommendations for me. Like,
Oh, yeah. You need to check out my friend Eli's band, Olympic Death. Check that guy out. Like everything that Eli's doing it's kind of funny because we talked about it on the podcast, but like the Krang album is like kind of similar to like what he's doing, but like he'd never heard of you guys before anyway. And then we showed him your music, and then he's like, yeah, very
yeah,
connected. But
brother
yeah,
from
I
another
would I
mother.
would yeah, and I'll text you his music. You need to check it out. And then also the guys that I had on, Jarek and Isaac, they have really cool music too. So I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
But
Well, what was the thing you guys were saying? Egg punk? Was that, or
yeah, egg punk. It's a genre that's kind of lo-fi. Like a lot of times, people will record it to task cams, and then another big thing is like having a drum machine. So it's almost like bedroom
okay,
pop, but it's like bedroom
oh, so
punk.
it's
Yeah.
chimp rock. It's have you ever heard that's what we used to call it, was chimp rock. It was like this guy Wes Wallace in Providence at the time, interesting, eccentric, had a zine called Wingnut that he was,
Yeah.
he put out really regularly, and he was like, pulling together bands that uh, he sort of lumped into this genre called chimp rock, which like Gertie Farish was one of those bands.
Yeah, that's one that we talked
But
about. Yeah.
like there's a comp actually that he released at some point that hopefully is somewhere on the internet.
I'll have to try to find that. That sounds
Yeah, but
interesting
like
though.
there's stuff that is very much in this egg punk genre that's all over that comp. And
Okay.
and you guys probably be very psyched about it. Uh,
Sick. I'll check it out. I always love finding new
yeah,
music,
if
so
I
that's
can't
awesome.
somehow find it online, I'll like send
Yeah.
you a recording of the vinyl that I have.
Oh, awesome. That'll be sweet. Yeah. That was my other question too. You just mentioned vinyl. But at your guys' show at the Krang shows, did you guys ever, did you have shirts or tapes? Did you guys have merch
We
at
had
all?
tapes that we made, which I don't have any anymore. I can only think of like two people in the world who probably have them. But if they do have them, I think finding copies of those would probably be kind of a cool thing to
Oh
replicate,
yeah, that'd be
distribute.
awesome.
We never had vinyl, never had shirts. There was a plan to put out vinyl. I think we made CDRs for people just because that was what was happening at the time. Um,
Yeah.
but but yeah, it wasn't really. I think we wanted to do a larger scale release, and at some point we were talking about it with Load, like Ben McCosker. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but then the band sort of fizzled out, and rule number one is don't release something that's expensive on your label if the band isn't going to do some shows. Like a
Yeah.
posthumous record for a band is not necessarily going to be a moneymaker.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. Well, I think hopefully this podcast will kind of shed light on the album because I think that this album deserves a release, like an actual release. I think it'd be cool if somebody, put it out like a reissue label. That'd be amazing. I would buy it. All my friends would buy it.
Well, that's
So
awesome. All of you guys getting excited about it, and maybe we can get a little critical mass behind that. I would also be interested to know if anyone has the original recording still. Like,
yeah, Dan thinks that he might have it, but he said he was gonna look, but he hasn't looked, so I don't know. He might have it.
yeah, I should
So
start texting St. Jake's about that because I think the version that we have on Bandcamp was recorded off a cassette, and it sounds a little sped up. Um,
mm-hmm.
which isn't a bad thing. Like it kind of makes the songs sound a little bit crazier than they actually were, but they were pretty
Yeah.
fast to begin with. I remember us like
Yeah.
recording and being like, "Oh yeah, we never played Balthazar that fast," but like, um, it, yeah, it. I'd like to get the original recordings and actually, do some sort of a proper release that sounds.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, you know that you got fans here in Idaho and Utah that will buy that if it ever comes out. I mean, that'd be awesome. My other question that I have, it's kind of specific, but I don't know if you remember, but my friend Jarek on the previous podcast, he talked about the song Wet Lips Disco, and he had an emotional response. I don't know if you heard, but he said that song made him cry. And I was just wondering if you have any memories of recording that song. I mean, to me, it sounds like you guys were just doing a little jam because it kind of fades in and fades
yeah,
out.
I
But
think it was. John had recorded a bunch of practices on his 4-track, and that was
mm-hmm.
that was a tape actually of with Josh Webb on drums, and we used to call him Wet Lips. He was always sort of licking his lips. I don't know if he would appreciate that name, but that was our sort of nickname for him. Um, but that was, so before he left the band, I think that was one of the little jams that we had recorded on John's fourth track. I remember
Yeah.
we went through a bunch of those, and likely there are a whole lot more that exist. But I know I don't know a whole lot more backstory about it. I just remember that was one moment that we thought was pretty nice, that was worth capturing.
Yeah, it is cool because it's this little dancey number. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that my friend, he had an emotional response to that song for whatever reason. I mean, he said on the episode that for some reason when that came on, it was like the culmination of the songs before that, and I think it was just the headspace that he was in. Anyway, he that made him emotional, which is kind of just interesting. You never know like what music's going to affect
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
in certain ways. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'm glad it took him to a good place, or hopefully it was a good emotional place.
it seemed like it when I talked to him about it.
Good.
So my last question for you is it's actually about the lyrics. I know that you were the one that did vocals on the album. Were you the main kind of lyricist for the band?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I wrote all the lyrics. Sometimes I think if I had a question about a certain section, the band might have helped change the lyrics, or
Mm-hmm.
turn them into something that we all could get behind. Um, some of the songs themselves were written by other members of the band. Uh, like, trying to recall, one of them was completely like Brian Gibson's song. I remember he brought me all the chord progressions, but then I wrote,
Mm-hmm.
uh, as Rigor Mortis actually was his.
Oh, that's one of my favorite ones on the
Yeah,
album.
it's
That
a
one's a
great
good one.
song. It's like a super good pop song, um, and I think because Brian brought it to me, I kind of worked with him, and he inspired a lot of the lyrics, like some of the
Mm-hmm.
things that he was going through in his life at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it was me writing stuff. Um,
That's cool. Is there any chance that you could have those lyrics on Bandcamp? I'd love to know like what the lyrics are
Sure, yeah. I
if you get a
mean, I
chance.
was listening to it after you wrote me, and kind of like, wow, I was in a weird headspace. Or I guess that song, like one of the songs I think was about, I used to work at this restaurant called Louis, a diner called
Mm-hmm.
Louis in Providence, that, the old man, Louis, was old and crazy, and kind of like still ran the restaurant, but was half in the bag most of the time, and yet sometimes would wake up from his nap and be somewhat murderous. It's like all of his family. It's a big Sicilian family that owns the place, and like, Louis would just sometimes come out of the kitchen with a knife and be, I'm gonna, it was. I think one of the songs was kind of about him and my relationship with him.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, I mean, and I'm happy to revisit those and try to write down.
Yeah.
Um,
That's just a selfish request. I love when I'm able to like read the lyrics because yeah, it kind of gives it like a different perspective on the song. So that would be
sure,
cool.
yeah, happy to. I mean, some of them are probably like really dumb. So
No, that's fine. That's totally fine. Well, I appreciate Jeff you coming on and talking about this album. Like I said, it means a lot to me and my friends. I'm glad that we discovered it. Do you have any other memories or thoughts that you wanted to share before we ended?
um, no, but I'm happy that you contacted me, and sort of helped me go down this journey again, and remembering some of these moments and times. It definitely makes me think like there was a lot there that, is worth sort of unearthing, and properly documenting. But like, uh, I appreciate you guys getting into it and listening to music of that time period. And like, uh, I think if you have other questions and things that you want to explore, or like things that you find that are sort of tangentially connected to other things that were happening in Providence at the time or in our bands,
Mm-hmm.
um, certainly send people my way. And like, I'm happy to sort of connect you with the right people to talk about stuff. Like, I don't know if I could ever find Wes Wallace again to talk about all of his weird stuff, but like, that Sonic Chimp comp would definitely be, something that you guys would dig. And like, keep listening and keep getting inspired by things, and like going and doing that next level of digging to sort of find out what's the story behind this. I think that's
Yeah.
amazing that you doing that.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored that you said yes, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna ask somebody in the band because this album just seems like it needs to be talked about more. So I'm glad that you agreed to do this. So
At some point, I want to hear all about your life as a mortician too. It's like, that's fascinating to me. Like, I really don't understand how someone ends up in that profession and like what it means to you. But like, I realize that's not the subject of this interview. So
no, you're good. You can text me anytime. Really appreciate Jeff, and I'll link all of your music on the show notes so people can go check out your solo stuff and then all the stuff that you're working on now. Pretty
cool.
exciting. That's awesome that you're still making music even after all these years, and yeah, just really inspired by the Krang album. And if you guys haven't listened to it, go listen to it now. So
All right.
thanks again,
Thank
Jeff.
you. All right. Good to talk to you. All right. Have a good day. Bye.